Minister, if we were to invite a family member of every individual who has died from drug overdose last year to sit in this chamber, we wouldn't have enough room for everybody. This is the most famous room in Ireland. These seats have been filled by famous people over the last 100 years or so. If we were to invite a single family member for every individual who has died from drug overdose in Ireland to sit here, we wouldn't have enough room. They'd have to sit in the public gallery. In 2017, 235 people died from fatal overdoses of drugs. That figure gets worse year on year. And we have one of the highest drug overdose rates in Europe. And if they were to come here, if those family members were to come here, Minister, if they were to sit in these seats, what would we say to them? I suppose we'd want to understand about the complexity of the issue. We'd want to show compassion. We'd want, I suppose, to listen to experts who would say that there's overlapping issues of poverty, of disadvantage, of alienation that leads somebody into drug use and addiction. We'd want to understand that. But fundamentally, Minister, what would actually happen, if we were to be honest, is that we'd look at each and one of those family members and we would say to them from the political system that the person that they loved who died was a criminal. Was a criminal. And that is the centre of what we're trying to change in our debate this morning. The Labour Party wants to stand with those family members. It wants to stand with those in addiction, wants to stand with those who are suffering, wants to stand with those who are in recovery, and say to them quite plainly and simply that you are not a criminal. Criminality and the criminalisation of the drug user is part of a stigma. It's part of a shame culture. It's a deliberate act of public policy. And the way it is, Minister, is that it is not drugs that kills people as much as bad drug policy. And what we in the Labour Party want to say today is that we don't need a war on drugs. We need a war on bad drug policy. Because this criminalisation and this stigmatising of people in addiction, it leads to people in the political system undermining and dehumanising those people who need support and who need compassion. It leads to a cabinet minister throwing leaflets around her own constituency, telling her constituents that the medical centre newly opened in her area won't be dealing methadone. It leads to a backbencher using dehumanising language when talking about somebody in addiction. It leads to, I might say, the most ineffective and absent senior and junior minister responsible for this area in a generation. Because the feeling from the political system is what you're doing, what you are, is criminal, and what you are is worthless. And it's not just the political system that feels that. The medical system feels it too. My colleague Marie Sherlock tells me that in Dublin, only 28% of GPs are involved in the methadone programme. And that's replicated right throughout the country. And it leads to a bizarre situation, Minister, where people, as Father Peter McVerry told us on Monday night, are travelling from Wexford to Dublin in order to get their methadone. And I know this to be true, because I once met a woman called Lisa. And Lisa was living in Portlaoise. She was a young mother. And she used to travel from Portlaoise to Dublin every single day on a bus to get her methadone. And the sad thing was for me when engaging with Lisa was that she felt she wasn't worth any more than that. She couldn't demand any better service than that because she felt on some level perhaps that she was a criminal, that she was worthless. And this young mother, we forced her to go from Portlaoise to Dublin every day on a bus over and back to get her methadone. I called into that centre a number of months later. I asked about Lisa, and I was told that she didn't make it. She didn't survive. We killed her. She wasn't a criminal. She wasn't worthless. And I can think of people, a man I knew called Paul, who had a daughter who has cystic fibrosis. And Minister, you should have seen the way they interacted with each other. They loved each other so deeply. The sparkle in her eyes when she saw him, the way that they used to spend time together. He wasn't well, and she wasn't well. And she didn't make it because of her illness. And as a result, he didn't make it because of his illness. And he isn't a criminal, and he wasn't worthless. But I noticed from the debate around the injecting facility, which was passed by this Oireachtas in 2017, Minister. What would any of us say if we came across a dead body in a laneway from a heroin overdose and we held that body in our arms? Would we say to that person, well, look, it was just tied up in the High Court. There was nothing we could do. It's planning. People are literally dying in the alleyways of our capital city. And we haven't made the intervention which is necessary in order to save those lives, which we could have done from a mobile facility that could have been enacted through emergency legislation. We haven't done it. It is us who are the criminals. We are the ones who are useless. Our inaction is criminal, not those who are dying. Freddie McMahon, whose brother died of drug-related issues, the former Dublin footballer, says that we need a tribe. We need a tribe for change. And I can speak of people in this house who are part of that tribe. I remember trying with my Labour colleagues to get this injecting centre idea over the line. And it was people like Pascal Donoghue in Fine Gael who were supportive. It was people like John O'Brien in Sinn Féin who were supportive. Even today, I hear people like Paul McAuliffe from Fianna Fáil making good speeches on decriminalisation. I know my colleagues like Nessa Horrigan from the Greens and Holly Cairns from the Social Democrats and Lynn Rowan, the Independent Senator, are speaking seriously about this issue. I think of people like Jean O'Kenny, who's been a warrior in this field. I think we absolutely do need a tribe that will change this conversation away from criminality and worthlessness to one that replicates what happened in Portugal. Because, Minister, what happened in Portugal 20 years ago, when they decriminalised the drug user, after 20 years, they have half the numbers of people in drug dependency programs, and they've reduced their drug overdose rate by 75%. So our call in the Labour Party today is quite simple. We stand with those who are affected by this issue. You are absolutely not criminal. You are absolutely not worthless. And we need the Irish people to understand and completely recast our view of this whole debate. You've promised the Citizens' Assembly on drugs. We need that Citizens' Assembly on drugs, Minister, because quite frankly, people are dying. They're dying on our watch. And it is our inaction that is criminal.